My son sold my beach house. He sold my car, used the money to pay off his own debts. When I came back, he laughed and said, "Well, now you are homeless." I smiled. Before I tell you how that happened, I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video, stay until the end, and tell me which city you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.
I spent 43 years building my life one careful piece at a time. That beach house in Monterey wasn't just real estate. It was every extra shift I worked as a nurse, every vacation I skipped, every dollar I saved after my husband Robert passed away. After decades of sacrifice, it was my reward, a quiet place overlooking the Pacific, where I could finally breathe. My son David used to love that house. When his daughter Emma was little, he'd bring her every summer. We'd walk the shoreline together, collecting shells, laughing, pretending time would never move on. But somewhere along the way, my son changed. Maybe it was the high-paying job in San Francisco that never quite worked out. Maybe it was his wife, Linda, always dressed in designer clothes we both knew they couldn't afford. I tried not to judge. He was my only child. At first, the warning signs were small. Phone calls asking for short-term loans that were never repaid, missed birthdays, excuses about being too busy to visit. When Emma turned 18 last year, David stopped bringing her to the beach house altogether. I should have noticed then. I should have understood that distance wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Because by the time I returned from a short trip and found everything gone, the house sold, the car missing, the locks changed, David wasn't ashamed. He was smug. And when he mocked me, standing there with nothing, he thought he'd won. That smile on my face? It wasn't defeat. It was certainty. Because some people think taking everything from you means the story is over. They never realize it's only just beginning. The way he'd started looking at my home with calculating eyes, asking questions about property values and my estate planning. But I trusted him. What mother doesn't want to trust her son? I'd gone to Seattle for 3 months to help my sister Carol through her cancer treatments. I'd told David about the trip, given him my spare key just in case of emergencies. I'd called him twice a week, and he'd always sounded normal. Maybe a bit distracted, but normal. The first shock hit me when I tried to use my credit card at the airport. Declined. I tried another. Declined. My heart hammering. I called the bank from a payphone. My hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. Mrs. Patterson, your accounts were closed 2 months ago, the representative said in that practiced, sympathetic tone. The instructions came with proper documentation and power of attorney signatures. Power of attorney? I'd never signed anything like that. I took a cab home, using the last cash in my wallet, watching the meter climb with growing dread. When we pulled up to my beach house, I saw the sign immediately. Sold. My legs barely carried me to the front door. My key didn't work. Someone had changed the locks. I stood there on my own porch, suitcase at my feet, staring at that sold sign like it was written in a foreign language. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible mistake. My phone rang. David? Mom, you're back. His voice was too cheerful with an edge I'd never heard before. I was just about to call you. David, what's happening? Why won't my key work? Why is there a sold sign? Oh, that? He laughed. Actually laughed. Yeah, I meant to tell you earlier, but I didn't want to worry you while you were dealing with Aunt Carol. See, I had some financial difficulties, pretty serious ones actually. And since you were gone and the house was just sitting empty, I figured my blood turned to ice. You figured what exactly? I sold it, Mom. The house and your car too. Got a decent price, all things considered. Paid off my debts. And you what? I couldn't breathe. David, that's my home. You can't just... Actually, I could. His voice turned cold, smug. You gave me power of attorney, remember? Or did you forget signing those papers last Christmas? I never signed anything at Christmas. I would have remembered. And honestly, Mom, this is probably for the best. You're getting older. That house was way too much for you to maintain. You should probably think about assisted living soon anyway. Assisted living? I was 68 and perfectly healthy. Where am I supposed to go, David? My voice cracked. He laughed again. That cruel, unfamiliar sound. I don't know, Mom. Maybe Aunt Carol will take you in. Or there's always a nice shelter downtown. His voice dripped with mockery. Face it, you're basically homeless now. Should have thought about that before spending all your money on that beach shack. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in my trembling hand as the Pacific wind cut through my jacket. My son, my own son, had stolen everything from me and he was laughing about it. But David had made one critical mistake. He didn't know the whole truth about that house. I sat on the curb outside what used to be my home, my suitcase beside me like a loyal dog, and took inventory of my life. One small suitcase, $47 in cash, a phone with 30% battery, and a fury so cold it felt like swallowing ice. David thought he'd won. He thought he'd left me with nothing. He was wrong. My hands were shaking. Not from fear anymore, but from rage. How long had he been planning this? Those papers he claimed I signed at Christmas. I remembered that visit now. He'd brought a stack of documents, said they were just updates to your will, Mom. Standard stuff. Linda had poured me wine, kept refilling my glass while David shuffled papers in front of me. I'd been tipsy, distracted by Emma's college stories. Had I signed something then without reading it? The realization made me sick. My own son had gotten me drunk to forge my signature. I couldn't go to Carol's. She was barely surviving her treatments. I had no other family nearby. David knew that. He'd timed this perfectly, striking when I was most vulnerable, or so he thought. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts with trembling fingers. There it was. Margaret Chen, attorney at law. Margaret and I had been friends since our kids went to school together. I'd helped her mother through hospice 15 years ago. We'd stayed in touch, meeting for coffee every few months. My finger hovered over her number. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday night, but this couldn't wait. She answered on the third ring. Maggie, is everything okay? No. My voice cracked. Margaret, I need help. Legal help, David. The words caught in my throat. Where are you right now? Sitting outside my house. Except it's not my house anymore. He sold it. Silence. Then give me your address. Don't move. I'm 20 minutes away. She made it in 15. Margaret pulled up in her silver BMW, took one look at me sitting there with my suitcase, and her expression shifted from concern to cold fury. She'd seen a lot in her 30 years as a lawyer, but this clearly shocked even her. Get in the car, she said. You're staying with me tonight, and then you're going to tell me everything. And her warm kitchen over tea I couldn't taste. I laid out the whole story. David's mounting debts, his increasingly desperate phone calls, that Christmas visit, the power of attorney I never knowingly signed, the sold house, his mocking phone call. Margaret listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, her face growing harder with each detail. Maggie, she said finally, did you ever set up that trust we discussed 5 years ago? My heart skipped. I'd almost forgotten. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I did. When Robert died, Margaret had helped me create an irrevocable trust. I'd transferred the beach house into it with my granddaughter Emma as the sole beneficiary. It was protection against nursing home costs, estate taxes, and yes, even against family members who might try to take advantage of me in my old age. I'd never imagined I'd need protection from my own son. So legally, Margaret said slowly, her eyes sharp, David couldn't sell that house, even with a legitimate power of attorney, because you didn't own it. The trust did. Which means every signature he forged, every document he filed, every dollar he received, it's all fraud, grand theft, possibly elder abuse. Margaret's smile was razor sharp. Maggie, your son didn't just commit a crime. He committed several felonies. The room seemed to tilt. What do we do? Margaret squeezed my hand. We destroy him legally, methodically, and completely. But first, we need to secure your position. Do you have the original trust documents in my safety deposit box at the bank? Good. Monday morning, we go to the bank. We get those documents, we file a police report, we contact the buyer of the house. That sale is void, by the way. They'll get their money back, but the house returns to the trust. To Emma. Emma, God, did my granddaughter know what her father had done? And David? I asked. Margaret's expression was ice. David is going to learn that stealing from your mother isn't just morally bankrupt, it's actually bankrupt, period. For the first time since seeing that sold sign, I felt something besides despair. I felt hope. And beneath it, something harder. Determination. David thought he'd made me homeless, helpless, a joke. He was about to discover exactly how wrong he was. My son had declared war. He just didn't know that I was the one bringing the army. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's smug face, heard his mocking laughter, but exhaustion had burned away, leaving something harder in its place. Margaret picked me up at 7 a.m., both of us dressed in business attire. Ready? She asked. More than ready. The bank manager, Mr. Richardson, remembered me. His face went pale when I explained the situation. That someone had closed my accounts using fraudulent documents while I was out of state. Mrs. Patterson, we verified the power of attorney. It looked legitimate. Did you call me to confirm? Margaret asked, her voice sharp. He shifted uncomfortably. The documentation was in order. We had no reason to suspect. You had every reason to suspect when an elderly woman's entire life savings suddenly disappeared. Margaret placed her briefcase on his desk with a decisive thump, but that's a conversation for later. Right now, we need access to Mrs. Patterson's safety deposit box. The documents were exactly where I'd left them. The trust agreement, the deed transfer, Emma's name in black and white as the beneficiary. The beach house had belonged to the trust for 5 years, well before David's sale. Margaret photographed every page with her phone, then turned to Mr. Richardson. We'll need copies of every document David Patterson submitted to close these accounts and access this box. Every signature, every form that's I'll need. To consult with our legal department. Consult quickly, Margaret said, because the police will be requesting the same documents. We're filing a report this afternoon. His face went from pale to gray. The police station was our next stop. Detective Sarah Morrison listened to my story, her expression growing increasingly grim. When Margaret laid out the trust documents, the timeline, the forged power of attorney, Morrison's jaw tightened. This is textbook elder financial abuse, she said, combined with fraud, forgery, and grand theft. Mrs. Patterson, I'm sorry this happened to you. Don't be sorry, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Just help me make it right. We'll need to contact the buyer of the property, verify the sale details, interview your son. He'll deny everything, I said. They always do. Morrison's smile was cold, but numbers don't lie, neither do bank records. We'll get them. By 3:00 p.m., the first dominoes had fallen. The buyer of my house, a young couple named the Hendersons, were horrified when Detective Morrison contacted them. They'd bought the house in good faith, had no idea it was fraudulent. Their lawyer was already filing to void the sale. But the truly satisfying moment came at 4:15. My phone rang. David Margaret, who was sitting across from me in her office, nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. I did. Mom. David's voice was high, panicked, completely different from his mocking tone 3 days ago. Mom, what the hell did you do? The police just called me. They're asking about the house, about your accounts. Hello, David. My voice was calmer than I felt. You called the cops on me? Your own son? Are you insane? No. I'm finally thinking clearly. This is ridiculous. I had power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. Really? I let the word hang. David, do you remember the trust? Silence. Complete, utter silence. What trust? His voice was smaller now. The irrevocable trust I set up 5 years ago. The one that transferred ownership of the beach house to Emma. Ring any bells? More. Silence. I could practically hear him trying to process this, trying to find a way out. That doesn't matter, he finally stammered. I'm your son. You gave me permission, David insisted. His voice was shaking now. I gave you nothing, I said calmly. You forged documents. You stole from me. And you didn't just steal from me, David, you stole from your own daughter. There was a pause. That house was Emma's inheritance. You can't prove that, he snapped. Actually, another voice cut in smoothly. We can. Margaret leaned closer to the phone. This is Margaret Chen, Mrs. Patterson's attorney. We have the original trust documents. We have bank records showing fraudulent account closures. We have the forged power of attorney. She paused just long enough to let it sink in. And we have your phone call from Friday night, which Mrs. Patterson recorded, where you admitted to selling the house. I hadn't recorded anything. David didn't need to know that. His breathing turned fast and shallow, almost panicked. This is a misunderstanding, he stammered. We can fix this. Mom, please. The only thing we're fixing, I said quietly, is how many years you'll spend in prison for elder abuse. You're bluffing, he said weakly. You wouldn't do that to me. I'm your son. You're right, I replied softly. You are my son. Then I let the silence stretch. And 3 days ago, you laughed at me. You told me I was homeless. You mocked me. I was joking, he rushed out. I was going to help you. I just needed more time. Goodbye, David. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From power. From the cold, steady certainty of watching him finally understand. Margaret looked at me and smiled. That, she said, was the point of no return. She was right. He knew now. And for the first time since he betrayed me, I wasn't the one afraid anymore. He knows you're not backing down. Good, I said. Let him know. Outside Margaret's office window, the sun was setting over the city. Somewhere out there, David was panicking, calling Linda, calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to escape the trap he'd built for himself. But there was no escape. Not this time. The next morning, Margaret and I met with the prosecutor's office. Assistant District Attorney James Park listened to our case with the focused intensity of a man who'd seen too many families destroy each other over money. This is solid, he said finally, tapping the stack of documents. Multiple felonies. The forged power of attorney alone is enough. Add the bank fraud, the illegal sale of trust property, Mrs. Patterson, your son is looking at 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years. My son in prison. The thought should have broken me. Instead, I felt nothing but cold resolve. How long until charges are filed? Margaret asked. A week? Maybe 2. We need to interview the buyers, the real estate agent, the bank officials. Build an airtight case. We were walking to Margaret's car when my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Grandma, can we talk, please? My heart clenched. Emma, my sweet granddaughter who'd done nothing wrong, who was caught in the middle of this nightmare. I called her immediately. Grandma. Her voice was thick with tears. Dad told me what's happening. He said, You're trying to send him to prison. That can't be true. Please tell me that's not true. Oh, David. Of course, he'd gotten to her first, spun his version of events. Emma. Sweetheart, let me explain. He said you're angry about a misunderstanding with the house, that he was trying to help you, and you turned on him. Grandma, he's my dad. How could you do this to him? The pain in her voice cut deeper than David's mockery had. Emma, your father stole from me. He forged documents, emptied my bank accounts, and sold my house. The house that was in your trust, meant for your inheritance. Then he called me and laughed. He told me I was homeless. He wouldn't do that. You're lying. The word hit like a slap. Lying. My own granddaughter believing her father over me. Emma, Mom says you're just bitter and jealous that Dad is successful. That you've always tried to control him with money. I can't believe I didn't see it before. Mom, Linda, of course she was involved poisoning Emma against me. Emma, please just look at the documents. Margaret can show you. I don't want to see anything. Just leave us alone. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like someone had carved out my chest. They're weaponizing her, Margaret said softly. Classic manipulation. Turn the family against you. Make you look like the villain. She called me a liar. My voice broke. I know, but Emma's 19. She loves her father. They're exploiting that. Once she sees the evidence. My phone rang again. David. I almost didn't answer, but Margaret nodded. What? I said. You really want to play this game, Mom? David's voice was venomous now. All pretense of charm gone. You've turned my daughter against me? Fine, two can play that game. You turned her against me, I just told her the truth. Truth? You want to talk about truth? Let's talk about Dad's life insurance money. The $50,000 you spent on that precious beach house instead of helping me through college. Remember that? I had to take out loans while you bought yourself a vacation home. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. David, that insurance money paid for your last 2 years of college. Your loans were for graduate school, which you dropped out of. That's not how I remember it. That's not how reality happened. Reality is whatever people believe. Mom and Emma believes me. My friends believe me. And when I'm done, everyone will know what a selfish, manipulative woman you really are. I'll make sure everyone knows you're trying to send your son to prison over a simple mistake. It wasn't a mistake, David. It was theft. Prove it. His voice dropped to something ugly. Go ahead. Take me to court. Watch what happens. I'll drag you through the mud. I'll tell everyone about your drinking, about how confused you've been getting, about how you've been showing signs of dementia. I don't have dementia. Who's going to believe that? A 6-8-year-old woman against her devoted son who was just trying to help her manage her finances. Think about it, Mom. Drop this, or I'll destroy what's left of your reputation. The line went dead. I was shaking. Margaret gripped my arm. He's desperate, she said. Desperate people make threats. It doesn't mean he's going to lie about me, tell people I'm senile, turn everyone against me. Let him try. We have medical records, bank statements, witnesses. The truth is on our side. But as we drove back to her house, David's words echoed in my mind. What if people believed him? What if Emma never forgave me? For the first time since this started, doubt crept in. Maybe I should have just let it go. Found a way to rebuild quietly. Was vengeance worth losing my family? Margaret seemed to read my thoughts. Take a few days, she said. Rest. Think. But Maggie, don't let him bully you into backing down. That's what he wants. I spent the next 3 days in Margaret's guest room, barely eating, barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face. Heard her calling me a liar. But I also remembered David's mocking laughter, his cruelty, his absolute certainty that he'd gotten away with it. And slowly, the doubt burned away. On the 4th day, Linda called. Not David this time, Linda, which meant they were escalating their strategy. Margaret? I was curled up on her couch staring at my phone. It's Linda. Don't answer if you're not ready. But I was ready. Something had crystallized during those 3 days of silence. David and Linda wanted me to break, to crumble, to give up. I was done breaking, I answered. Hello, Linda. Maggie. Her voice was warm, sympathetic, completely fake. I'm so glad you picked up. I've been worried sick about you. David told me about the misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. As if grand theft could be a simple miscommunication. There's no misunderstanding, Linda. Of course there is. David was trying to help. He saw you struggling, saw the house sitting empty, and made an executive decision. Maybe he should have called you first, but he was under so much pressure. The debts were crushing him, Maggie. He was trying to keep our family afloat by stealing my home. A pause. Then her voice shifted harder. You have Margaret Chen's money. You're staying in her nice house. Clearly, you're fine. Meanwhile, David is facing prison because you can't forgive a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. He forged documents. He was trying to help. Linda's mask was slipping. And now you're destroying him. Destroying our family. Emma is devastated. She can barely sleep. Do you even care what you're doing to your granddaughter? The guilt hit like a punch. Emma, always Emma. The weapon they knew would hurt most. Emma is upset because you and David are lying to her. We're not lying. We're protecting her from the truth. That her grandmother is vindictive and cruel. I closed my eyes, breathed, found that cold, hard place inside me. Linda, I know what you're doing and it won't work. You think you're so smart, don't you? So high and mighty. But here's what you don't understand, Maggie. Family forgives. Family doesn't send each other to prison. If you go through with this, you'll lose Emma forever. Is that what you want? I want justice. Justice. She laughed bitter and sharp. You want revenge? You're a sad, bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has his own life. Well, congratulations. You're about to be alone for the rest of yours. She hung up. I sat there, phone in my lap, feeling the weight of her words. Alone for the rest of my life. Was she right? Was I sacrificing my family for pride? No. I said it out loud to the empty room. No, I'm not. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching David that actions have consequences. That you can't steal from people, even your own mother, and laugh about it. Margaret found me an hour later, still sitting there. You okay? She asked. Linda called, tried to make me feel guilty. Classic manipulation. Did it work? Almost. I looked up at her. Margaret, am I doing the right thing? She sat beside me, took my hand. Maggie, I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've seen hundreds of families torn apart by money. And I've learned something. When someone steals from you and feels no remorse, showing mercy doesn't heal the relationship. It just teaches them they can do it again. But Emma is 19. Right now, she believes her father because she loves him. But she's smart. Eventually, she'll see the truth. And when she does, she'll understand why you did this. The doorbell rang. Margaret frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. Through the window, I saw a familiar car. My heart lurched. Carol. My sister Carol, who should have been in Seattle recovering, was standing on Margaret's porch. I opened the door. Carol, what are you doing here? She looked thinner, tired, but her eyes were fierce. I heard what David did. Margaret called me. She pulled me into a tight hug. I came to tell you something, Maggie. You are not alone. You hear me? You are not alone. I started crying then, unable to hold it back any longer. I'm supposed to be taking care of you. I sobbed. You're sick. I'm in remission. And you've been taking care of everyone your whole damn life. Now it's our turn. She pulled back, gripped my shoulders. David stole from you. He mocked you. And now he's trying to make you feel like you're the villain. But you're not. You're the bravest woman I know. Over the next week, more support arrived. Margaret's investigator, Tom, who'd been quietly gathering evidence, brought me coffee and assured me the case was solid. Detective Morrison called to update me. David's story was falling apart under scrutiny, and the bank was cooperating fully. Even the Hendersons, the couple who'd bought my house, reached out to express their support. We're not angry at you, Mrs., Henderson said. We're angry at the man who defrauded both of us. Slowly, the loneliness lifted. I wasn't alone. I had people who believed me, who saw the truth. And that truth was simple. I deserved justice. David and Linda had tried to break me with threats and guilt, but I was stronger than they'd ever imagined. They came on a Sunday morning. I was at Margaret's house reviewing documents with her for the 10th time when the doorbell rang. Margaret checked the security camera, and her face hardened. It's David and Linda, both of them. My stomach dropped. I don't want to see them. You don't have to. I'll send them away. But something in me stirred. Curiosity, maybe, or the desire to face them head on, to show them I wasn't afraid anymore. No, I said. Let them in. Margaret frowned. Maggie, let them in. But you stay with me. She studied my face, then nodded. Every word gets recorded legally. When Margaret opened the door, David and Linda stood there looking repentant. David's eyes were red, as if he'd been crying. Linda clutched his arm, her expression sorrowful. Mom, David said, his voice breaking. Please, can we talk? It was such a perfect performance. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it. You can come in, Margaret said coldly. Mrs. Patterson has agreed to hear you out, but I'm present for the entire conversation, and everything you say is being recorded. Linda's smile flickered for just a moment. Of course, we understand. We sat in Margaret's living room, me on the couch with Margaret beside me, David and Linda across from us, in matching armchairs. David leaned forward, hands clasped, the picture of remorse. Mom, I don't know where to start. I'm so sorry. I was desperate, drowning in debt, and I made terrible decisions, but I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that, David, I said quietly. You told me I was homeless. You laughed at me. I know. He covered his face with his hands. I know, and I hate myself for it. I was trying to convince myself that what I did was okay, that you'd be fine, but I was wrong. So wrong. Linda reached over, rubbed his back. He's been tormented by guilt, she said softly. He can't sleep, can't eat. Maggie, he knows he made a terrible mistake. A mistake would be forgetting to call me. I said this was systematic theft. You're right. David looked up, tears streaming down his face. Real tears or fake? I couldn't tell anymore. It was worse than a mistake. It was betrayal, and I'm asking, begging for a chance to make it right. Make it right. How? We'll pay you back every penny, the house, the accounts, everything. We'll sell our condo, liquidate our assets. It'll take time, but we'll do it. He swallowed hard. Just please, Mom, don't press charges. Don't send me to prison. I can't. Emma needs her father. Please. There it was. Emma, the trump card they always played. Mom, David continued, his voice desperate now. If I go to prison, it destroys everything. My career, our family, Emma's future. She'll never forgive you. Is that what you want? To lose your granddaughter forever? Linda leaned forward. Maggie, family forgives. Family finds a way. We can get through this together, but only if you drop the charges. The prosecutor will listen to you. If you tell them you don't want to pursue it, they'll drop it. Margaret's hand tightened on my arm. A warning. I looked at David, really looked at him, searched his face for the little boy I'd raised, the teenager who'd brought me flowers on Mother's Day, the young man who'd called me after his father's funeral, and sobbed in my arms. Was any of that person still in there? David, I said slowly, do you even understand what you did to me? Yes. God. Yes, Mom. I destroyed your trust. I stole from you. I cut him off. You didn't just steal my house. You stole my safety, my peace. You made me feel worthless and discarded. You called me homeless as a joke. And now you're here crying because you're facing consequences. His tears stopped just like that. The shift was so abrupt, it was almost comical. I'm trying to apologize, he said, voice cooling. You're trying to manipulate me again. I'm trying to save our family by asking me to let you get away with multiple felonies. Linda stood up abruptly. This is pointless. She's not going to listen. Sit down, Linda. David snapped. Then to me, Mom, be reasonable. You're not actually going to send me to prison. You love me. You've always loved me more than anything. I did love you more than anything. Past tense. The words felt heavy. But you killed that, David. The moment you laughed at me on that phone call, you killed it. His face transformed. The sorrow vanished, replaced by cold fury. So that's it. You're really doing this? Yes. Fine. He stood Linda beside him. Then you've made your choice. And when Emma hates you, when you're alone in some nursing home with nobody visiting, remember you did this. You chose revenge over family. I chose justice over enabling a thief. We're done here. Linda grabbed David's arm. Come on, let her rot in her self-righteousness. They headed for the door, but David turned back one last time. You know what, Mom? I'm glad I sold that house. I'm glad I took everything because you deserved it. You've always been controlling, always held money over my head. Well, now you have nothing to control me with, and I hope it was worth it. The door slammed behind them. I sat there shaking, not from fear, from fury, from the sheer audacity of his words. They showed their true faces, Margaret said quietly. You see that, right? The apology was fake. They were trying one last manipulation. I know. My voice was steady. I knew the moment they walked in, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. David's attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Harrison Watts, had filed motions to dismiss, claiming the power of attorney was legitimate and that this was a family dispute blown out of proportion. But piece by piece, our case solidified. The bank record showed David had accessed my accounts using forged signatures. The handwriting expert Margaret hired confirmed the signatures on the power of attorney didn't match mine. The real estate agent admitted David had pressured him to rush the sale, claiming I was in a nursing home with dementia, a complete lie that the agent hadn't bothered to verify. And then Margaret's investigator found something beautiful. "Maggie," Tom said, spreading papers across Margaret's dining table. I pulled David and Linda's financial records. Want to guess where some of that money went? Paying off debts. Some, but a lot went to a ski condo in Tahoe and luxury cars and a Mediterranean cruise they took 2 months ago. He slid over photos. David and Linda on a yacht, champagne glasses raised, enormous smiles. This was posted to Linda's private Instagram while you were in Seattle helping your sister. While I was taking care of Carol, scraping together money for her medications, my son was living it up on my stolen savings. The betrayal hit fresh, sharp, clean. "Can we use this?" I asked. "Absolutely," Margaret said. "It proves this wasn't about desperate debt. It was about lifestyle, about greed." The preliminary hearing arrived. I walked into that courtroom with Margaret on one side and Carol on the other, feeling like I was marching into battle. David and Linda sat at the defendant's table with Harrison Watts, both dressed conservatively, playing the role of respectable wronged family members. David wouldn't meet my eyes. Judge Patricia Romano presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense reputation. She'd seen it all. Margaret assured me. Nothing shocked her. The prosecutor, James Park, laid out the case methodically. The forged power of attorney, the fraudulent sale of trust property, the bank fraud. Each charge backed by documents, statements, evidence. Harrison Watts tried to spin it. "Your Honor, this is a tragic family misunderstanding. Mr. Patterson genuinely believed he had authority to act on his mother's behalf. He was trying to help her by selling her house without her knowledge." Judge Romano interrupted. He believed she was becoming forgetful, unable to manage her affairs. Did he have her examined by a doctor? Did he petition for guardianship through proper legal channels? Watts faltered. "No. But so he just decided unilaterally to seize and sell her property. He had power of attorney which was forged." Judge Romano looked at David directly. "Mr. Patterson, did you or did you not have your mother sign that power of attorney while she was drinking at Christmas dinner?" David's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, my client declines to answer. I'll take that as a yes." She turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Park, what else?" James presented the financial records, the yacht photos, the ski condo, the luxury spending spree. David's face went red. Linda went pale. "Your Honor, Harrison Watts tried desperately. My client's spending habits are irrelevant. They're entirely relevant when your client claims he sold his mother's house due to financial desperation. These photos were taken 2 months ago. He's standing on a yacht with $1,000 champagne. That was a gift. From whom? Where's the documentation?" Silence. Judge Romano looked at David with something close to disgust. "Mr. Patterson, you forged legal documents, committed bank fraud, and illegally sold property belonging to a trust. Then you mocked your mother, your own mother, and called her homeless. And now you're here, claiming it was all a misunderstanding." "Your Honor," David started. "I'm not finished." Her voice could have cut glass. "I've presided over many cases of elder abuse, but I've rarely seen such calculated cruelty combined with such breathtaking arrogance. You didn't just steal from your mother. You humiliated her. She's making it sound worse than it is." David burst out. "She's always controlled me with money, always held it over my head. I was just taking what should have been mine anyway." Harrison Watts grabbed his arm. "David, stop talking." But David was unraveling, his composure shattering. "That house should have been mine. I'm her son. Everything she has should be mine. She's just a bitter old woman who Mr. Patterson..." Judge Romano's voice cracked like a whip. "You are making this remarkably easy for me." The courtroom was dead silent. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm binding you over for trial on all charges: forgery, fraud, grand theft, and elder abuse. Bail is set at $200,000. She looked at him coldly. "And Mr. Patterson, if I were you, I'd spend the time before trial learning some humility, because when you're convicted, not if, when, you're going to need it in prison." David's face went white. Linda started crying. Judge Romano turned to me. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm sorry for what you've endured. The court will ensure the property is returned to the trust and you'll be made whole. Thank you, Your Honor. As we left the courtroom, David tried to approach me. Mom, please. Two baifs stepped between us. Stay away from Mrs. Patterson, one said firmly. Judge's orders. I walked past my son without a word, head high, Margaret and Carol flanking me. Behind me, I heard Linda sobbing and David shouting something about how this wasn't over. But it was over. He'd lost control completely, and everyone had seen it. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of watching David try and fail to explain away the evidence. 3 days of his lawyer spinning desperate narratives that fell apart under cross-examination. 3 days of truth, undeniable and brutal. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, guilty on all counts. I sat in that courtroom, Carol's hand in mine, and watched my son's face crumble as the verdict was read. Guilty of forgery. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of grand theft. Guilty of elder abuse. Linda sobbed in the gallery. David stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief, as if he genuinely couldn't comprehend that he was being held accountable. 2 weeks later came the sentencing hearing. Judge Romano had clearly prepared for this moment. She looked at David with the same cold disgust she'd shown at the preliminary hearing. Mr. Patterson, you had every advantage in life. A loving mother who sacrificed for you, education, opportunities, and you repaid her by stealing everything she'd worked for, then mocking her suffering. Your Honor, David started. I'm not interested in your excuses. I've read the psychological evaluation. I've reviewed your financial history. This wasn't a moment of desperation. This was a pattern of entitlement and exploitation. She paused. The prosecution recommends 5 years, but I'm sentencing you to the maximum 10 years in state prison. 10 years. David's knees buckled. The baifs caught him. Additionally, Judge Romano continued, you are ordered to pay full restitution to Mrs. Patterson, $473,000 plus interest and legal fees. And upon release, you will be on probation for 5 years, during which you will have no contact with Mrs. Patterson unless she initiates it. No, David shouted. You can't do this. She's my mother. You can't keep me from I can and I did. Baifs removed Mr. Patterson. They dragged him out, still shouting. Linda followed, screaming about injustice and cruel judges. The courtroom doors closed behind them, muffling the chaos. I sat there, numb, 10 years. My son would spend 10 years in prison. Carol squeezed my hand. You okay? I don't know. The beach house was returned to the trust within a month. The Hendersons were compensated. David's seized assets covered their losses and more. Emma's inheritance was secure. But the real victory came 6 weeks after the sentencing. Emma called. I almost didn't answer. After months of her anger, her accusations, her belief in David's lies, I wasn't sure I could handle more rejection, but I answered anyway. Grandma. Her voice was small, broken. Can I come see you? She showed up at my beach house. My beach house. Finally mine again. On a gray Saturday morning. She looked thin, exhausted, older than her 19 years. I saw the trial transcript, she said, standing on my porch. I read everything, the evidence, the photos, Dad on that yacht while you were taking care of Aunt Carol. Tears streamed down her face. I believed him, Grandma. He told me you were being cruel and I believed him. Emma, I called you a liar. I told you I hated you and you were telling the truth the whole time. She sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I pulled her into my arms and we both cried there on my porch. 2 women broken by the same man's cruelty. He's my dad, Emma whispered. I wanted to believe he was good. I needed to believe it. I know, sweetheart. I know. Can you ever forgive me? I pulled back, looked at her tear-stained face. Emma, there's nothing to forgive. He manipulated you. That's what manipulators do. I should have listened to you. You're listening now. That's what matters. We went inside, made tea, and talked for hours. She told me about the lies David had spun, how he'd portrayed me as controlling and bitter, how Linda had reinforced every false narrative, how they'd isolated her from anyone who might tell her the truth. I'm not going to visit him, Emma said finally. In prison, I can't. Not after what he did to you. That's your choice to make. He'll be furious. Let him be furious. I took her hand. Emma, you are free now. Free from his manipulation. Free from the lies. Don't let guilt trap you. She nodded, eyes red but clear. The final piece of justice came 3 months later. Linda filed for divorce. With David in prison and their assets seized to pay restitution, she saw no reason to stick around. The ski condo, the luxury cars, all sold off. She moved back to her parents' house in Arizona, broke and bitter. David wrote me letters from prison, dozens of them. At first, they were angry, blaming me for destroying his life, calling me vindictive and cruel. Then they became pleading, begging for forgiveness, promising he'd changed. I didn't respond to any of them. Margaret suggested I consider filing for a restraining order if the letters continued. But eventually they stopped. My son was gone. Not dead, but gone from my life just as surely. And I found I could live with that because the alternative, letting him get away with it, teaching him that cruelty had no consequences, would have destroyed me far more completely. 1 year after the trial, I stood on my beach, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific in shades of gold and pink. The same view I'd worked 43 years to earn. The same view David had tried to steal. But I'd won it back, and it had never looked more beautiful. Emma came down from the house, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She'd moved in with me 6 months ago, taking online classes from UCLA while working part-time at a local bookstore. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Morning walks on the beach, evening dinners on the deck, quiet conversations about everything and nothing. Aunt Carol called, Emma said, handing me a mug. She's coming to visit next month. Says her doctors cleared her for travel. Carol was thriving, 2 years cancer-free, stronger than ever. She'd moved to a condo 20 minutes away after declaring she was done with Seattle's rain. We had dinner together every Sunday. Perfect, I said. We'll make her that lemon cake she loves. Emma smiled, a real smile, free of the shadows that had haunted her after the trial. She's going to eat the whole thing by herself. Probably. Life had become simple, sweet, full of small joys I'd taken for granted before. Coffee on the beach, Emma's laughter, Carol's visits, Margaret's weekly dinners where we'd drink wine and talk about everything except David. I'd started volunteering at a senior center, teaching financial literacy classes. How to protect yourself from family fraud was my most popular session. Apparently, I wasn't the only mother who'd been betrayed by a child. The other seniors treated me like a hero. You fought back, one woman told me, eyes fierce. My son stole from me and I just let it happen. I was too ashamed to fight. But you showed us it's possible. I'd made more friends in this past year than in the previous decade. Real friends. People who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression darkened slightly. Dad, I asked gently. She nodded. He keeps trying to call from prison. I haven't answered. You don't have to. I know. She sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I should just once to hear what he has to say. That's your decision, sweetheart. But remember, he had a whole year to realize what he did wrong. If he's only apologizing now because he's in prison, is it real remorse or is it just another manipulation? Emma thought about that. You're right. He's had a year, and from what Linda's lawyer told me, he's still blaming everyone but himself. Linda. The last I'd heard, she was working retail in Phoenix, living in her parents' spare bedroom. Her Instagram, once full of yacht photos and designer bags, had gone silent. Word through Margaret's network was that she'd tried to write a book about her wrongful persecution, but no publisher would touch it. David's fancy lawyer friends had all disappeared when his money ran out. His tech industry connections had quietly cut ties. He'd built his life on image and wealth, and without those props, he had nothing. Some people might have felt satisfaction in his suffering. I felt nothing, just a distant, cold indifference. He wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger who'd chosen greed over love, and this was the consequence. I've been thinking, Emma said, about changing my major to law. I looked at her in surprise. I want to help people like you, Grandma. People who've been taken advantage of by their own families. Make sure they get justice. She smiled. Margaret's offered to mentor me. Said, I have righteous fury in spades. Pride swelled in my chest. Your father tried to turn you into an accomplice. Instead, you became an advocate. He taught me what not to be, Emma said quietly. That's worth something, I guess. We stood there together, grandmother and granddaughter, watching the waves roll in. The same ocean that witnessed my lowest moments standing on my own porch. Suddenly homeless now witnessed my victory. That evening, an email arrived from the prosecutor's office. David had been denied early parole. According to the report, his behavior in prison had been uncooperative and entitled. He'd gotten into fights, refused counseling, continued blaming everyone but himself. When I called Margaret, she didn't sugarcoat it. He'll serve the full 10 years, she said. Possibly longer if he keeps this up. Good, I replied, and I meant it. Because David needed to learn what I'd understood my entire life. Actions have consequences. The world doesn't owe you anything. And if you build your life on lies and theft, it will eventually collapse under its own weight. I lost a son, but I gained something far more valuable. My dignity, my peace, and a real relationship with my granddaughter Emma, one built on honesty, not manipulation, on my terms. In my home, that was worth more than any false idea of family loyalty ever could be. Looking back, I learned a hard truth. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's enablement. I spent decades sacrificing for David, believing love would be enough. But love without accountability doesn't create gratitude. It creates entitlement. If someone steals from you, even if they're family, you have the right to protect yourself. You're not cruel for demanding justice. You're not bitter for refusing to stay a victim. Would I change anything? No. Emma and I are building something real now. Something honest. And David, he's finally learning that actions have consequences. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember this, you deserve respect, especially from family.
Thank you for staying with me until this point. Please comment number 1 so I know you're still here with me. And a quick notice before we continue. The next story contains some fictional elements and is created for entertainment and reference purposes only. Thank you for your support and for being here.
My son said, I'm just waiting for this old woman to die so I can get the inheritance. I heard every word from behind the door. The next day, I did something that made him scream so loudly, the neighbors came outside. Before I tell you what happened, I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen until the end and tell me which city you're listening from. I like knowing how far these stories travel. For 68 years, I believed family was everything. Even after my husband Robert passed away 3 years ago, I clung to that belief like a lifeline. Family meant loyalty, sacrifice, standing by each other no matter what. My son Brian was my entire world. I raised him after Robert's death, carried him through childhood, supported him through college, paid for his wedding, picked him up every time life knocked him down. Or at least, I thought I did. The house I lived in, our house, sat in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Robert and I bought it 40 years ago when Brian was still a toddler. Every inch of it was soaked in memory. The kitchen where I taught Brian how to bake cookies, flour everywhere. The backyard where Robert built him a treehouse with his own hands. The living room where we celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. I worked as a nurse for 35 years before retiring. Long shifts, night rotations, missed holidays. I saved carefully, planned responsibly. Between Robert's life insurance and our pensions, I wasn't rich, but I was secure. The house was paid off. And apparently, that was all my son could see. I didn't know when Brian started seeing me as an obstacle instead of a mother. I didn't know when love turned into entitlement. But hearing him say those words, not knowing I was standing right there, something inside me went cold. In that moment, I understood a truth I had spent decades avoiding. The man outside that door was no longer my little boy. And the woman he was waiting to die was me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I planned. Because when someone tells you who they are, especially when they think you can't hear them. You'd better believe them. And the very next day, everything changed. I had decent savings, and I could live independently without burdening anyone. That independence mattered to me. I'd seen too many elderly patients lose their dignity, their autonomy, their sense of self. Brian and Jennifer had been visiting more frequently over the past 6 months. At first, I was delighted. After years of seeing them maybe once a month, suddenly they were stopping by every week, sometimes twice a week. Jennifer would bring casseroles, though I noticed she never stayed to eat them with me. Brian would ask about my health, my medications, my doctor's appointments. "Just worried about you, Mom," he'd say, squeezing my hand. "You're not getting any younger. I was 68, not 88. I still drove, still gardened, still volunteered at the library twice a week." But I appreciated his concern, or so I thought. The first odd moment came when I caught Jennifer photographing documents in my study. I'd gone upstairs to get my reading glasses and found her with her phone aimed at my filing cabinet. "Oh," she'd startled, pressing the phone to her chest. Brian wanted to know if you had the number for that plumber you recommended." "It's in my phone," I'd said slowly. "You didn't need to go through my files." She'd laughed, too brightly, too quickly. "Old habit. I always write things down." Then there was the day Brian asked about my will. We'd been sitting in the kitchen drinking tea when he brought it up casually, as if discussing the weather. "Mom, you do have everything in order, right? A will, power of attorney, all that." "Of course," I'd replied. "I updated everything after your father died. And I'm the executive." "Yes, Brian. You're my only child." "Who else would it be?" He'd nodded, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. A calculating look I'd never seen before. The visits became more intrusive. Jennifer started commenting on the house, how big it was for one person, how difficult the stairs must be getting, how much maintenance it required. "You know, Margaret, there are these wonderful senior communities now," she'd said one afternoon, showing me a glossy brochure she'd conveniently brought along. "Everything on one floor, no yard work, activities every day. I like my yard work," I'd told her firmly, "and I can manage my stairs just fine." But she persisted, leaving brochures on my kitchen table, sending me links to retirement homes. Brian joined in, suddenly concerned about my safety, living alone. "What if you fell, Mom? What if something happened and no one was here?" "I have a medical alert bracelet," I'd reminded him. "And neighbors who check on me." Still, the pressure mounted. They wanted me to sign something. A new power of attorney, they said, just to make things easier if I ever needed help managing my affairs. "I don't need help," I'd insisted. That's when the comments started. Little digs, carefully worded to sound like concern. "You seem to be forgetting things lately, Mom. Are you sure you took your medication today? Dad would want us to take care of you." It was Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago when everything changed. Brian and Jennifer had come for dinner. Their suggestion, not mine. I'd made pot roast, spent all afternoon preparing Robert's favorite recipe. But Jennifer had picked at her food, checking her phone constantly while Brian seemed distracted. After dinner, I'd excused myself to get dessert from the kitchen. That's when I heard them. I'd just stepped into the hallway when Brian's voice drifted from the living room, sharp and clear. "Honestly, I'm just waiting for the old woman to die so we can get the inheritance." How much longer can she possibly hang on? I froze, my hand on the kitchen doorframe. Jennifer's laugh was cold. "The house alone is worth at least $500,000. And whatever she has in savings, we need that money now. Not whenever she finally kicks it. We're drowning here." My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe as my son, my only child, discussed my death like a business transaction. Slowly, I turned and walked back upstairs. They didn't hear me. They were too busy planning their future, the one that required my absence. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed I'd shared with Robert for 35 years. My hands were shaking. What had I done to deserve this? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Brian's words over and over, waiting for the old woman to die. Not Mom, not Mother, the old woman. How long had he felt this way? Had he ever loved me? Or had I been nothing more than an eventual payday? By dawn, I'd moved past the tears. Grief gave way to something colder, sharper. I needed to think clearly. As a nurse, I'd learned to assess situations methodically, to separate emotion from action. That skill served me now. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. What exactly did I know? They wanted my money. They wanted my house. They were impatient for me to die. And they'd been working on something. Those documents Jennifer photographed, the power of attorney they kept pushing, the comments about my memory and competence. Were they trying to have me declared incompetent? The thought sent ice through my veins. I'd seen it happen to patients. Family members swooping in, claiming their elderly relative couldn't manage their own affairs, getting conservatorship, controlling everything. I opened my laptop and started researching elder financial abuse, undue influence, conservatorship fraud. The articles I found were horrifying and familiar. Adult children draining parents' accounts, forcing them into nursing homes, isolating them from friends and other family. But I had no other family, no siblings, no cousins nearby. Robert's brother lived in Oregon. We exchanged Christmas cards but hadn't spoken in years. My friends were mostly my age or older, dealing with their own health issues and family problems. I was alone in this. No, not alone. I had something they didn't expect. I was aware. They thought I was oblivious. A naive old woman who trusted her loving son. That gave me an advantage. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. That afternoon, while supposedly napping, I went through my files carefully. Everything seemed in order. My will, my bank statements, my investment accounts, but something nagged at me. The next day, I called my bank. Just a routine check, I told them. Could they confirm who had access to my accounts? Let me see. The representative said, I heard typing. You have a joint account holder, Brian Wilson, added 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. I never added anyone to my accounts. According to our records, you came in last March and I was in the hospital last March. I'd had a minor surgery, nothing serious, but I'd been admitted overnight. I couldn't have come to the bank. A pause. I see. Mrs. Wilson, you may want to come in and speak with our fraud department. I made an appointment for the following Monday. Then I called my lawyer's office, the attorney who'd handled Robert's estate. But the receptionist informed me he'd retired last year. We can refer you to someone else in the practice, she offered. No, I said carefully. Thank you, but I'll find someone on my own. I didn't know who I could trust. Brian might have connections to Robert's old lawyer. I needed someone completely independent. That evening, Brian called. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How are you feeling? How many times had he asked that question lately? Not, how are you, but how are you feeling? As if expecting me to report illness, decline, incompetence. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice warm. Just fine. Great. Jennifer and I were thinking of coming by this weekend. We could help you with some yard work. That's kind. But I've already hired someone. I hadn't, but I would. Oh, he sounded disappointed. Well, maybe we could just visit, spend some time together. This weekend isn't good. I have plans. I didn't. But he didn't need to know that. Another pause. Plans? With friends from the library? We're going to a matinee and dinner. It was a lie, but it served a purpose. I needed them to see me as active, social, independent, not isolated, and vulnerable. That's great, Mom. Really great. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness, thinking I needed a plan. Not a vague idea, but a concrete strategy. First, secure my assets. Get Brian off my accounts. Change my passwords. Document everything. Second, find out what they'd already done. Had they forged my signature on other documents? Were there other fraudulent accounts or agreements? Third, protect myself legally. Find a good attorney. Update my will. Or better yet, create a trust they couldn't contest. Fourth, gather evidence. If this went to court, and it might, I needed proof of their intentions, their manipulation, their fraud. The old Margaret would have confronted Brian directly, would have tried to understand, to fix the relationship, to believe there was some misunderstanding. But the Margaret who'd heard her son wish for her death was different. That Margaret understood that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. Some relationships were already dead. I'd just been too blind to see the corpse. I pulled out my notepad and started writing. Names of banks, account numbers, dates. I could remember everything I'd need to build my case. Brian wanted to wait for me to die. He was going to wait a very long time. And when I finally did go, he'd find out just how expensive his cruelty had been. Monday morning, I dressed carefully. My navy suit, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. Pearl earrings, sensible heels. I wanted to look competent, sharp, in complete control. The woman who walked into First Liberty Bank was not someone whose signature could be easily forged. The fraud department was on the second floor. A young woman named Rachel Mendes greeted me, her expression professional but sympathetic. Mrs. Wilson, I've pulled your account records. Can you walk me through your concerns? I explained about the joint account holder, about being in the hospital when the change was supposedly made. Rachel's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm going to show you something, she said, turning her monitor toward me. This is the signature card from March 12th. There it was. My name signed in handwriting that looked like mine, but wasn't. The pen pressure was wrong. The loop on the G, too small. I'd signed my name thousands of times on medical charts. I knew my own signature. That's not my signature, I said firmly. Rachel nodded slowly. Mrs. Wilson, I need to be direct with you. This appears to be forgery. We'll need to file a fraud report, which means involving law enforcement. Do it, I said, without hesitation. She pulled out a form. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I met her eyes. The person who benefits from it, my son, Brian Wilson. To her credit, Rachel didn't flinch. I know this is hard, Rachel said gently. But unfortunately, we see this more often than people realize. Adult children, caregivers, relatives who have access to documents and personal information. She slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were copies of everything. The forged signature card, my account statements, a neat list of withdrawals Brian had made over the last 6 months. Small amounts, carefully spaced out, $30,000. He'd taken $30,000 from my savings without me noticing. My hands went cold. What happens now? I asked quietly. We're freezing the joint access immediately, Rachel said. Your accounts are secure as of this moment. We'll file an internal fraud report, and you should also file a report directly with the police. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. And Mrs. Wilson, you need to speak to an attorney. I felt my stomach tighten. If he's done this, she continued, there may be other documents you don't know about. Power of attorney forms, medical directives, even attempts to transfer property deeds. The thought made my chest ache. Can you recommend someone? I asked. She didn't hesitate. She wrote a name on a slip of paper and slid it to me. Ajanar Vasquez, elder law specialist. She's handled cases like this before, Rachel said. She'll know exactly what to look for. I walked out of the bank in a daze and sat in my car for a long moment, staring at that name. Then I called Eleanor from the parking lot. Her assistant scheduled me for Wednesday afternoon, 2 days away. I told myself I could wait 2 days, but Brian couldn't, because that very evening, while I was standing at the stove, making dinner, my phone rang. And when I saw his name on the screen, I knew whatever he was about to say, he wasn't calling to apologize. Mom, something weird happened. The bank called and said there was a problem with your account, so they'd already notified him. Good. Let him worry. Yes, I said calmly, stirring my soup. There was an unauthorized person on my account. I had it removed. Silence then. Unauthorized. Mom, that was me. Don't you remember? We set that up so I could help you pay bills if you needed it. I never set that up, Brian. I was in the hospital when that signature card was filed. You must have done it before the surgery. You probably forgot. There it was. The gaslighting, trying to make me doubt my own memory. I didn't forget the signature wasn't mine. It was forgery. His voice changed harder now. That's a serious accusation. Mom, are you feeling okay? Maybe the medications. My medications are fine. My memory is fine. And I've filed a fraud report with the bank and the police. The silence that followed was deafening. You called the police on your own son? I called the police on whoever forged my signature and stole $30,000 from my account. Stole? Jesus Christ, Mom. I was holding that money for you, keeping it safe because you can barely manage your checkbook anymore. I manage perfectly well, I interrupted. And I want that money returned within 72 hours or I'll pursue criminal charges. You're making a huge mistake. His voice was shaking now with anger or fear. I couldn't tell. Jennifer and I have been trying to help you, and this is how you repay us. Help me? I almost laughed. Is that what you call waiting for the old woman to die? Dead silence. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, but his voice had gone flat. I was standing in the hallway, Brian, 3 weeks ago. I heard every word. He hung up without another word. I set my phone down and my hands were steady. Good. I'd needed him to know that I knew. No more pretense. No more games. 20 minutes later, Jennifer called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice, syrupy, sweet, concerned. Margaret, Brian told me about the misunderstanding with the bank. We're worried about you. These kinds of paranoid thoughts can be a sign of cognitive decline. We think you should see a doctor. We only want what's best for you. I deleted the message. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. I recognized the law firm's name. Cooper and Associates. The same firm that had handled Brian's business matters. The letter informed me that Brian Wilson, acting out of concern for his mother's welfare, was petitioning for an emergency conservatorship evaluation due to my recent erratic behavior and apparent cognitive impairment. There it was, the real plan. They weren't waiting for me to die naturally. They were trying to have me declared incompetent, take control of everything, and then what? Put me in some facility where I'd be isolated, medicated, unable to fight back. I called Eleanor Vasquez's office. This is Margaret Wilson. I have an appointment Wednesday, but I need to see her today. It's an emergency. The receptionist put me on hold, then came back. Miss Vasquez can see you at 4. I spent the rest of the day gathering documents. Every bank statement, every medical record, every piece of paper that proved my competence. Robert's death certificate, my nursing license, my volunteer records from the library. When I walked into Eleanor Vasquez's office that afternoon, I wasn't a frightened old woman. I was a nurse who'd spent 35 years documenting evidence, and I had everything they needed to bury my son's lies. Eleanor Vasquez was 60, sharpied, with silver hair cut in a precise bob. She listened, without interrupting, as I laid out everything. The overheard conversation, the forged signature, the stolen money, the conservatorship petition. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. Mrs. Wilson, I'm going to be direct. Your son and daughter-in-law are following a playbook I've seen dozens of times. Isolate, undermine credibility, establish control, liquidate assets. The conservatorship petition is the critical move. Can he actually get it? Not if we move quickly. You're clearly competent. You're here. You've documented everything. You caught the fraud yourself. But family court judges can be swayed by a concerned child, especially if he brings witnesses who will testify to your supposed decline. What do? Eleanor pulled out a legal pad. First, we file a response to his petition, including your medical records, cognitive tests, testimony from your doctors. We paint him as the problem, not you. Second, we get a restraining order preventing him from accessing your property or finances. Third, we create an ironclad trust and estate plan that he cannot contest. How long will this take? The conservatorship hearing is in 3 weeks. We have time, but we need to move fast. She paused. Mrs. Wilson, there's something else you should consider. If he's committed fraud, stolen from you, forged documents, you could press criminal charges. The district attorney might be very interested in this case. The thought of my son in handcuffs made my stomach turn. But then I remembered his voice. Waiting for the old woman to die. Let's start with stopping the conservatorship, I said. Then we'll see what's necessary. Over the next week, Eleanor moved like a force of nature. She subpoenaed my medical records, arranged for a psychiatric evaluation to prove my competence, filed a comprehensive response to Brian's petition, and drafted new estate documents. She also hired a forensic accountant to trace what Brian had done with my $30,000. The answer came back within days. He'd used it to cover his mortgage, car payments, and credit card debt. He and Jennifer were drowning financially, just as I'd overheard. Meanwhile, I underwent the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Raymond Chen spent 3 hours with me. Cognitive tests, memory exercises, psychological assessments. At the end, he smiled. Mrs. Wilson, you're sharper than most 40-year-olds. I evaluate. Your son's petition is baseless. The hearing was set for October 18th, 10 days away. That's when Brian and Jennifer came to my house. It was Saturday evening. I was reading in the living room when I heard the key in the lock, the spare key I'd given Brian years ago for emergencies. I'd forgotten about it. They walked in without knocking. Brian's face was red, veins standing out on his forehead. Jennifer looked frightened but determined. "We need to talk," Brian said. I stood up slowly, deliberately. "You need to leave. I've filed a restraining order." "It hasn't been granted yet," Jennifer interrupted. "We're still legally allowed to be here. What do you want?" Brian moved closer. "I want you to drop this insanity, the fraud claims, the hearing, all of it. You're making our family a laughingstock, humiliating us in front of everyone. You humiliated yourself when you forged my signature and stole my money. I didn't steal anything. That money was for your own good, to make sure you'd have care when you needed it. Funny how it ended up paying your mortgage." His expression turned ugly. "You're going to regret this, Mom. We have witnesses who will testify you've been acting strange, forgetting things, making irrational decisions. Dr. Patel will say you've been missing medical appointments. I haven't missed any appointments. And your neighbors will talk about how you've become a recluse, paranoid, refusing help from your loving family. I felt cold. You've been laying groundwork, getting people to doubt me." Jennifer stepped forward and her voice was honey-sweet poison. "Margaret, we're giving you one chance. Drop everything. The fraud report, the hearing, all of it. We'll pretend this never happened. We'll even return the money if that's what you want. But you have to stop this witch hunt. And if I don't," Brian's face was inches from mine now, "then we'll destroy you. We'll drag you through court, expose every moment of confusion, every forgotten detail. We'll tell everyone about the time you left the stove on, about the medications you mix up, about how you called me by Dad's name last Christmas. I never called you Robert. Who's going to believe you over us? A confused old woman, or her concerned, devoted son?" He grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "You will lose this fight, and when you do, I'll put you in the cheapest nursing home I can find. You'll rot there alone while Jennifer and I live in this house and spend every penny you tried to keep from us." I looked at his hand on my arm, then into his eyes. "Take your hand off me, or I'll call the police right now and tell them my son is physically assaulting me." He let go, but Jennifer spoke up, her voice shaking with rage. "You ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, get out of my house." "This will be our house soon enough," Brian said. "And when it is, I'm burning every trace of you and Dad, every photo, every memory. It'll be like you never existed." They left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there trembling, not with fear, but with rage. How dare he threaten me? How dare he put his hands on me? I took photos of the bruises already forming on my arm. Then I called Eleanor, told her everything, sent her the photos. "That was assault," she said grimly. "And terroristic threats. Mrs. Wilson, we're filing for an emergency restraining order tomorrow morning, and I think it's time to call the district attorney." But that night, after everything, I felt exhausted. The adrenaline drained away, leaving me hollow. I'd stood up to them, but the cost was becoming clear. This was my son, my only child, the baby I'd held, raised, loved. Was there any part of that boy left in the man who threatened me tonight? I took the next few days for myself. Ella Laner handled the legal matters. I stayed home, tended my garden, tried to find peace in routine. The restraining order was granted. Brian and Jennifer were prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. I needed these quiet days. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The letter arrived on Wednesday, slipped through my mail slot in a cream-colored envelope. I recognized Jennifer's handwriting, the careful, rounded script she used for thank you notes and holiday cards. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery. "Dear Margaret, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation, and I owe you an apology. Brian and I have been under tremendous stress. His job situation has been difficult, and we've made some poor decisions in our panic. But that's no excuse for how we've treated you. I want you to know that I've always loved you, like my own mother. You welcomed me into your family with open arms, and I've never forgotten your kindness. The thought that I've hurt you breaks my heart. Brian is too proud to say this, but he's devastated. He loves you so much, and the idea that he might lose you not to death but to this terrible misunderstanding is destroying him. Please, can we talk? Just you and me, woman to woman. I think if we could sit down together, we could work this out. Family is too precious to throw away over money. I'm willing to admit we made mistakes. Are you willing to forgive us with love and hope? Jennifer, I read it twice, then set it aside. The old Margaret would have melted, would have seen this as an olive branch, a chance for reconciliation, would have wanted to believe that love could overcome betrayal. But I kept thinking about Brian's hand on my arm, his threat to erase every trace of Robert and me from existence. I kept hearing him say he was waiting for me to die. Some things couldn't be forgiven with a pretty letter. An hour later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, Margaret, it's Helen. Helen Patterson, Brian's godmother. We'd been close once before Robert died. She'd drifted away afterward. I'd assumed she was busy with her own life. Helen, how are you? I'm well, dear, but I'm calling because, well, Brian came to see me yesterday. My stomach tightened. Did he? He's very worried about you. He says you've been acting strangely, making accusations, and he thinks you might need help. He asked if I'd talk to you, try to convince you to see a doctor. So this was the new strategy. Use people I trusted, people who'd known me for years to undermine me. Helen, did Brian tell you he forged my signature to access my bank accounts and stole $30,000? Silence. Then he said there was a misunderstanding about some money he was holding for you. Did he tell you he's filed for conservatorship, trying to have me declared incompetent? He said he was concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. Did he tell you I have medical and psychiatric evaluations proving I'm perfectly competent? Did he mention that I've filed a police report for fraud or that I have a restraining order against him for assault and threats? Another long silence. Margaret, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Helen, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't let my son use you to manipulate me. I hung up gently, but firmly. Over the next few days, 3 more people called. Robert's old fishing buddy, a woman from my former church, a neighbor I barely knew, all with the same message. Brian was worried. Maybe I should reconsider. Family was important. Surely we could work this out. Each time I calmly explained the facts, the forgery, the theft, the threats. Some believed me, some didn't. But I didn't waver. Eleanor called on Friday. How are you holding up? They're trying to get to me through other people. Pressure from all sides. Classic manipulation tactic. They want you to feel isolated, like everyone thinks you're wrong. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, and realized I meant it. I know what's true. That's enough. Good, because I have news. The DA's office is interested. They want to meet with you next week. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to the library for the volunteer social hour. I'd been avoiding it, too wrapped up in my own problems. But I needed to be around people who knew me as myself, not as someone's difficult mother. Carol Martinez, the head librarian, greeted me with a hug. Maggie, we've missed you. I've missed you too. We had coffee and cookies in the staff room, chatting about books and library politics and everything except my personal drama. It felt normal, grounding. Then Carol said quietly, "Are you okay? You seem different." And somehow sitting there with this woman I'd worked alongside for 5 years, I found myself telling her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. My sister went through something similar. She said her daughter tried to get control of her house. It's more common than people think. She squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you different. Thank you, I whispered. And Maggie, you're not alone. Whatever you need, someone to go to appointments with you, a witness to conversations, just a friend to call. I'm here. I felt tears prick my eyes. That means everything. That night, Jennifer sent another text. Please, Margaret, for Brian's sake, for the sake of the grandchildren you might have someday, don't destroy our family over pride. Grandchildren I might have someday. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost funny. I blocked her number. Then I made myself tea, sat in Robert's favorite chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but certainty. I was on the right path, and I wasn't walking it alone. The restraining order had a loophole Eleanor warned me about. Supervised visitation could still be arranged through a third party. I didn't expect Brian to use it, but on Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Pastor Mike from the church I used to attend, the one I'd left after Robert died, because grief made sitting through services unbearable. I opened the door cautiously. Pastor Mike. Hello, Margaret. His smile was warm but uncomfortable. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. Brian asked if I could facilitate a conversation between you both just to talk, find some common ground. Behind him, sitting in a car at the curb, were Brian and Jennifer. My first instinct was to slam the door, but Eleanor's voice echoed in my head. Document everything. Witnesses are valuable. Come in, I said, all of you. Pastor Mike looked relieved. He signaled to the car, and Brian and Jennifer emerged, walking up the path like mourners approaching a funeral. We sat in the living room, me in Robert's chair, them on the sofa. Pastor Mike in the wingback chair playing mediator. Margaret. Pastor Mike began gently. Brian has shared with me that there's been some family conflict. He's hoping we can find a path toward reconciliation. Has he told you what the conflict is about? I asked. He mentioned some disagreements about financial management and healthcare decisions. He forged my signature, stole $30,000, and tried to have me declared incompetent so he could control my assets, I said evenly. Those aren't disagreements. Those are crimes. Pastor Mike blinked. Brian, is this true? Brian's face rearranged itself into an expression of patient suffering. Mom has gotten some things confused. There was a joint account that we set up together for her convenience. Stop, I interrupted. I was in the hospital during surgery when that signature card was filed. The bank has confirmed the signature is forged. You're misremembering. I have the police report. I have the forensic document analysis. Don't lie to a pastor in my living room. Jennifer spoke up, her voice trembling. Margaret, we came here to apologize, to try to fix things, and you're attacking us. You came here to manipulate me into dropping the charges before the conservatorship hearing. Pastor Mike shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should all take a breath. I don't need a breath, I said. I need my son to admit what he's done and return what he stole. Brian's mask slipped. You're really going to do this? Drag me to court? Humiliate me? Destroy my reputation over money? You destroyed your own reputation when you committed fraud. I'm your son. His voice rose. Your only child. Dad would be ashamed of you for treating me like this. The invocation of Robert was like gasoline on fire. I stood up. Don't you dare speak for your father. Robert would be horrified by what you've become. Jennifer stood too, her face flushed. You self-righteous. We've spent years catering to you, listening to your endless stories about the good old days, pretending to care about your boring volunteer work. Jennifer, Brian started. No, she whirled on him. I'm done pretending. Your mother is a miserable old woman who's holding on to money she'll never spend while we're drowning. She could help us, but instead, she's hoarding everything, like some bitter miser. I worked for my money, I said coldly. I saved it. It's mine, not yours. You're going to die alone, Jennifer spat. No family, no one who cares rotting in this house with your precious memories. Was it worth it choosing money over your son? I didn't choose money over my son. My son chose money over me. I just overheard him doing it. Brian stepped forward and Pastor Mike quickly moved between us. Let's all calm down. You want to know the truth, Pastor? Brian's voice was shaking. My mother is sick, paranoid. She's imagining things, twisting innocent actions into some conspiracy. We've been trying to help her, and she's treating us like criminals. The bank statements don't imagine $30,000 missing, I said. Money I was protecting for you. Then where is it, Brian? Show me the account where you've been protecting it. He couldn't answer. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Jennifer grabbed her purse. This is pointless. She's not going to listen to reason. Reason? I almost laughed. You broke into my house last week and threatened to erase my existence. You call that reason? Pastor Mike's head swiveled toward Brian. You threatened her. I was upset. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, I continued. I have photos. I filed an assault report. Pastor Mike stood up, looking between us with something like horror. I don't think I should be here. This is beyond my ability to mediate. Good instinct, I said. You should probably leave before they say something you'd be obligated to report. Brian's face tightened. You know, we've spent years trying to support you. Years of polite smiles and doing our best, even when it was difficult. If that's how things are going to be, fine. Keep your money. Keep your house. Live the way you want. And when you're gone, I'll handle everything responsibly. Maybe even donate what's left to charity in your memory. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Gladly. Jennifer was already at the door. Enjoy your victory, Margaret. Enjoy being right while you have no one left who loves you. They stormed out. Pastor Mike lingered, looking shaken. Margaret, I had no idea. It's all right. Thank you for trying. After he left, I locked the door and leaned against it. My heart racing, my hands were shaking. Jennifer's words echoed. Die alone. No one who loves you. Was she right? Had I chosen pride over family? No. I'd chosen dignity over abuse. Truth over lies, self-respect over manipulation, but God had hurt. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I saw a 6, 8-year-old woman with tired eyes but a straight spine. I saw someone who'd spent her whole life caring for others and finally had learned to care for herself. The fear was still there. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing the last connection to the family I'd built. But underneath it burned something hotter and brighter. Determination. They wanted me broken. I'd show them what a woman with nothing left to lose could do. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined from TV shows. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the air smelled of floor polish and stale coffee. Ella Lahner sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, her briefcase open, documents arranged in perfect order. Across the aisle, Brian and Jennifer sat with their attorney, Marcus Cooper. A man in his 50s with slicked back hair and an expensive suit. Brian wore a navy suit and a somber expression, playing the concerned son. Jennifer dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The grieving daughter-in-law, I wore my burgundy dress, pearls, and my nursing pin. I wanted the judge to see exactly who I was. Judge Patricia Hernandez entered, and we all stood. She was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Please be seated. We're here for the matter of Brian Wilson's petition for conservatorship over Margaret Wilson. Mr. Cooper, you may present your case. Cooper stood smoothly. Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking situation. Brian Wilson is a devoted son who's watched his mother's cognitive decline with growing alarm. Mrs. Wilson has begun making erratic financial decisions, accusing family members of theft, filing baseless police reports. She's isolated herself from friends and family, showing classic signs of paranoid delusions associated with early dementia. I kept my face neutral, but I felt Eleanor's hand briefly touch mine under the table. Steady. We have witnesses who will testify to her declining state, Cooper continued. Her doctor, neighbors, family, friends. Mr. Wilson isn't seeking this conservatorship out of greed. He's trying to protect his mother from herself before she squanders her savings, or worse, hurts herself. Judge Hernandez looked at me. Mrs. Wilson, you're represented by counsel. Eleanor stood. Ella Lahner Vasquez, Your Honor, and will be vigorously contesting this petition. I assumed as much. Mr. Cooper, call your first witness. Dr. Patel, my primary care physician, took the stand. Cooper questioned him about my medical history. Doctor, have you noticed any cognitive decline in Mrs. Wilson? Dr. Patel shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Wilson is 68. Some memory issues are normal. Yes or no, doctor? Have you observed memory issues? Minor ones, but nothing that suggests. Thank you, doctor. Ella Lahner stood for cross-examination. Dr. Patel, you've been Mrs. Wilson's doctor for how long? 15 years. In those 15 years, have you ever diagnosed her with dementia, Alzheimer's, or any cognitive impairment disorder? No. Have you ever recommended she be placed under conservatorship or deemed incompetent? Absolutely not. In fact, didn't you recently clear her for volunteer work that requires extensive mental acuity, cataloging rare books at the library? Yes, I did. Thank you, doctor. Cooper called Helen Patterson next. She testified reluctantly that I'd seemed confused during our last phone call, that I'd made wild accusations about Brian. Eleanor's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Patterson, when did you last spend time with Mrs. Wilson in person? About 3 years ago. 3 years. So your testimony about her current mental state is based on one phone call. Well, yes, and during that call, Mrs. Wilson told you about documented bank fraud. Did you verify whether that fraud actually occurred? Helen hesitated. No. So you dismissed her concerns without investigating them. No further questions. Cooper called 2 neighbors who testified I'd become withdrawn, stopped attending community events, seemed paranoid. Ella Lanar established that both neighbors had been approached by Brian weeks earlier, asking them to keep an eye on me, planting seeds of doubt. Then Cooper called his star witness, Jennifer. She took the stand with red-rimmed eyes, clutching her tissue. Cooper led her through a narrative of my supposed decline, forgotten appointments, repeated conversations, confusion about dates. Mrs. Wilson, can you describe the incident that most concerned you? Jennifer's voice trembled. She accused us of stealing from her. She said we'd broken into her accounts, forged documents. She was so agitated, so convinced of this conspiracy. It broke my heart to see her like that. And how did you respond? We tried to help her. We offered to take her to a neurologist to get her evaluated, but she refused. She's gotten so paranoid that she can't accept help from the people who love her most. Judge Hernandez looked skeptical, but Cooper pressed on. No further questions. Eleanor stood, and her smile was cold. Mrs. Wilson. Jennifer, may I call you Jennifer? I suppose. Jennifer, you testified that my client accused you of forging documents. Are you aware that First Liberty Bank has confirmed that the signature on the joint account application was indeed forged? Jennifer's face palled. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. Are you aware that a forensic document examiner has verified the forgery? I don't know anything about that. Really? Because the account in question has your husband's name on it. The account from which $30,000 was withdrawn over 6 months. You knew nothing about this. Brian handles our finances. So, you're testifying that your husband committed fraud without your knowledge? I'm not testifying to anything. You're twisting my words. Eleanor pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence the bank's fraud report, the forensic analysis, and statements showing where the stolen money went directly to paying the Wilsons' mortgage and credit card debt. Judge Hernandez took the documents, her expression hardening. Eleanor turned back to Jennifer. You also testified about my client's paranoid accusations. But if the fraud is real, documented and proven, then she wasn't paranoid, was she? She was accurate. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed. We were trying to help by stealing her money. It wasn't stealing. It was yes. Ella Laner's voice was sharp. Please finish that sentence. What was it? Jennifer couldn't. She dissolved into tears, and Cooper called for a recess. After the recess, Ella Lanar called me to the stand. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth as if I'd do anything else. Eleanor walked me through my background, my nursing career, my volunteer work, my medical history. Then she showed the judge my recent psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Chen evaluated you for 3 hours. What was his conclusion? That I'm cognitively intact with no signs of dementia or impairment. He said my memory and reasoning skills are above average for my age. Why did you have this evaluation done? Because I knew my son would claim I was incompetent. I wanted proof that I'm not. Let's talk about the bank fraud. How did you discover it? I explained everything calmly, methodically. The overheard conversation, the bank investigation, the forged signature, the stolen money. Mrs. Wilson, why do you think your son filed for conservatorship? Because I caught him. Because I filed fraud charges. And he needed to discredit me before this went to trial. Do you love your son? The question caught me off guard. I did. I don't know if I still do. I love who he used to be or who I thought he was, but the man who threatened to erase my existence, I don't know that person. Ella Lennar let that hang in the air. No further questions. Cooper approached for cross-examination, but he was floundering now. Mrs. Wilson, isn't it true that you've become isolated from your community? I volunteer at the library twice a week. I have friends. I'm not isolated. Your neighbors say you've become withdrawn. My neighbors were coached by my son to say that. You've accused your own son of serious crimes based on overhearing one conversation. Based on bank records, forensic evidence, and his own admission when confronted, Cooper had nothing. He sat down. Judge Hernandez reviewed her notes. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of her pen. Finally, she looked up. I'm ready to rule. My heart hammered. Mr. Wilson, I'm denying your petition for conservatorship. Mrs. Wilson has demonstrated clear competence. She's articulate, organized, and rational. Her medical and psychiatric evaluations support this. The evidence shows not cognitive decline, but justified concern about actual fraud. Brian's face went white. Furthermore, Judge Hernandez continued, her voice hard. I'm troubled by what's been presented here. The documented bank fraud, the forged signature, the timing of this petition. It suggests an attempt to use the courts to silence a victim of financial exploitation. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation. Your Honor, Cooper started. I'm not finished. I'm also granting Mrs. Wilson's request for a permanent restraining order against Brian Wilson and Jennifer Wilson. They are prohibited from contacting her, approaching her property, or interfering with her financial or medical affairs. This order is effective immediately. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Brian stood up, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. Jennifer was crying, but not the delicate tears from earlier. These were harsh, ugly sobs. Ella Lennar gathered her documents. Congratulations, Margaret. I nodded, but I felt hollow. I'd won, but the cost was everything. As we left the courtroom, Brian shouted after me. You've ruined us. Are you happy now? I turned to face him. No, Brian, I'm not happy, but I'm free. 2 weeks later, I sat in the district attorney's office. Assistant DA Rebecca Torres reviewed my case files. Mrs. Wilson, we have enough evidence to charge your son with forgery, fraud, and elder financial abuse. These are serious felonies. He could face prison time. Will he accept a plea deal? Probably. Most defendants do. But I want you to understand, if we prosecute this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son will be permanently severed. It already is, I said quietly. He severed it when he decided I was worth more dead than alive. Then we move forward, yes. Rebecca nodded. Well, start with the forgery and fraud charges. The evidence is ironclad. Eleanor helped me finalize my new estate plan. Everything went into an irrevocable trust. Upon my death, my house would be sold and the proceeds donated to charities supporting elder abuse victims. My savings would fund nursing scholarships. Brian would receive exactly $1, the legal minimum to prove he wasn't accidentally omitted. Are you sure about this? Eleanor asked. I thought about the boy I'd raised, the man I'd hoped he'd become, and the stranger who'd threatened me in my own living room. I'm sure 6 months later, Brian pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony fraud. He received 3 probation, a $10,000 fine, and was ordered to repay the $30,000 he'd stolen with interest. Jennifer filed for divorce 2 months into his probation. She sent me a letter blaming me for destroying her marriage. I threw it away unread. Brian sent one letter from his attorney, offering to reconcile if I dropped the restitution requirement and restore him to my will. I sent back a single word, no. The house felt emptier without the hope of family reconciliation, but it also felt lighter. I'd removed a poison I hadn't known I was drinking. Spring came early that year. My garden bloomed more beautifully than it had in decades, as if the earth itself was celebrating my freedom. I'd expected grief, loneliness, regret. Instead, I found something unexpected. Peace. The morning routine I developed felt like meditation. Coffee on the back porch, watching cardinals at the theater Robert had built 20 years ago, tending my roses, the ones I'd planted when we first bought the house. reading in the afternoon sun, streaming through the kitchen window. But I wasn't isolated. Carol from the library had become a genuine friend. We met for lunch every Wednesday, discussing books and politics and the small joys of life. She'd introduce me to her book club, 8 women ranging from 50 to 75, all sharp, funny, and refreshingly honest. "You're glowing," Carol said one afternoon as we shared pie at the diner. "I don't think I've ever seen you this relaxed." "I spent 40 years caring for others," I told her. "My patients, my husband, my son. It's strange, but losing Brian freed me to finally care for myself." Through Carol, I'd also met David Chen, Dr. Chen's brother, a widower my age who volunteered at the library's literacy program. We'd started having coffee after our volunteer shifts. Nothing romantic, just easy companionship with someone who understood loss and rebuilding. "You know what I don't miss?" I told him one Saturday as we reorganized the children's section, walking on eggshells, wondering if I'd said something wrong, done something wrong, being afraid in my own home. David nodded. He'd had a similar experience with an adult daughter who'd tried to manipulate him after his wife died. There's a special kind of betrayal when it comes from your own child. But there's also a special kind of freedom when you finally stop carrying their expectations. My volunteer work expanded. The library asked me to lead a memoir writing workshop for seniors. I discovered I loved teaching, loved helping others find their voices. One of my students was an 80-year-old woman named Ruth, who'd been estranged from her son for 15 years after he'd tried to have her committed so he could access her inheritance. "I thought I was the only one," she told me after class one day, tears in her eyes. "I thought I was a terrible mother for protecting myself." "You're not terrible," I assured her. "You're strong." We formed an unexpected support group, 5 women from the class who'd all experienced some form of elder abuse from family members. We met monthly, shared our stories, supported each other. It was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. I also started speaking at local senior centers about financial protection and elder abuse awareness. Eleanor connected me with advocacy organizations. My nursing background gave me credibility, and my personal experience gave me passion. The thing they don't tell you, I told a room of 70 seniors at a community center, is that the abuser is usually someone you love, someone you trust. And that makes it so much harder to see, to accept, to fight against, but you are worth fighting for. Your life, your autonomy, your dignity, they matter. The applause was thunderous. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances and the inevitable small-town gossip network, I heard about Brian's unraveling. The divorce from Jennifer had been ugly. She'd taken half of what little they had left after legal fees and restitution payments. He'd lost his job. Corporate didn't appreciate employees with fraud convictions. He'd taken work as a delivery driver, barely making ends meet. He'd moved into a small apartment across town. No more aspirations of inheriting my house and living the comfortable life he'd planned. Helen Patterson, who'd reluctantly testified for him, told Carol, who told me that Brian had shown up at her house asking for money. "He looked terrible," Helen had said. "Gaunt, desperate. He tried to tell me it was all your fault, that you'd destroyed his life out of spite." "What did you tell him?" Carol asked. I told him that he destroyed his own life the moment he forged his mother's signature. Jennifer had apparently moved to North Carolina to live with her sister, leaving no forwarding address for Brian. The divorce papers cited financial irresponsibility and criminal behavior as grounds. I felt no satisfaction in Brian's suffering, no triumph, just a quiet, settled sense that consequences had found their proper home. My lawyer, Eleanor, eventually became more than just my attorney. We met every few months to review my estate plan, but most of the time we talked about life, our work, our disappointments, our hopes for what still lay ahead. At our last lunch, she smiled at me and said, "You know what amazes me? Most of my clients collapse after a family betrayal. They withdraw. They shrink. But you didn't." She paused. "You grew." I laughed softly. "I had good soil," I said. And I did. Carol, David, Ruth, the friends who became family when blood failed me. I finally had space to breathe and room to grow. That evening, I sat alone in my garden, watching the sun sink low, the sky turning amber and soft rose, the kind of quiet that feels earned. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Want to try that new Vietnamese place next week? I smiled and typed back, yes. Somewhere across town, Brian was probably sitting in a small apartment, convinced he was the victim of my cruelty, replaying his own version of the story. But here, in the home I fought to protect, surrounded by the life I rebuilt, I knew the truth. I wasn't cruel for defending myself. I wasn't heartless for choosing peace. I was finally free. So let me ask you, what would you do if you overheard your own child wishing for your death? Would you confront them, forgive them, or would you do what I did and protect yourself, even if it meant letting go forever? There's no simple answer. Every family is different. Every betrayal cuts in its own way. But this much I know, you are worth protecting. Your dignity matters. Your life's work matters. Your peace matters. If my story resonated with you, please share it. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary betrayals, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. And remember this, it's never too late to choose yourself.
Thank you for listening to my story. I truly appreciate you staying with me until the end. I will see you in the next story.